I kinda can't believe that I'm saying this, but this episode is sponsored by Universal Pictures Home Entertainment. You can now rent or own Drop, Universal's action thriller, at home with behind-the-scenes featurettes. The film is set in a high-end restaurant where Violet's first date is upended by a series of phone drops, presenting a sinister choice: kill her date or lose her child. I had a great time watching this one, and it only made sense for me to recreate the courses from the film. And I don't want to spoil anything, but make sure to watch Drop at home to see what the delicious panna cotta I recreated has to do with the film's killer. Scan the QR code or head to the link in the description for more information.
And now for the main event.
All right, so we have the duck salad for the lady.
Thank you.
And the Kobe filet for the gentleman. And the truffle mashed potatoes. And do you need anything else?
Hey, what's up guys? Welcome back to Binging with Babish, where this week we're taking a look at the delicious and terrifying dinner from Drop, mostly because I'm about to rewatch it and I need snacks. Now, in many ways, Drop is a cautionary tale about technology and file sharing preferences. So first and foremost, we're going to place our phone in Do Not Disturb mode, instantly foiling any would-be murderous blackmailers, unless of course you have a child being held hostage at home. Now, our hero couple starts with a coconut calamari appetizer, but not your typical calamari. Instead, these are calamari steaks, made from an entirely different species of squid that I could not get my hands on. I just bought the biggest squids that I could, cut out circular steaks, finally scored and weighted them down in an effort to keep them from curling, which they still did instantly. Actual calamari steaks have a softer, almost swordfish-like texture that I just wasn't going to be able to achieve using this squid, so let me know in the comments if you want to see the actual calamari steaks, which I will special order and post as a short. In the meantime, there's still plenty of deliciousness to explore from this meal. The one I was most excited to try was a quote-unquote crunchy munchy duck salad with crystallized ginger, cashews, and some fancy looking sauces. Now I'm going to try to prepare all these dishes restaurant style, that is, doing as much prep as possible beforehand so that the dishes can be fired in short order. First, we can both score and dry brine the duck, placing shallow diagonal cuts about 1 centimeter apart in a crosshatch pattern, taking care not to cut all the way through the skin and down to the meat. This is going to help the fat render out from the skin better and give us a prettier, crunchier crust. Once you got them crosshatched, we're going to generously season both sides with kosher salt and place them skin side up on a wire rack set in a rim baking sheet and let them hang out in the fridge uncovered for at least 1 and up to 4 days, drying out the skin, deeply flavoring the meat, and helping to retain moisture. Just make sure you don't have any funky smells in your fridge, otherwise they will be absorbed. There were also what looked like some pickled red onions in the mix, so we're going to slice a red onion into rounds using a mandolin for consistency, separate the rings, and give them a quick cold pickling, adding some mustard seeds for pop and flavor, and building a brine out of 1 cup of red wine vinegar, a half cup of water, 2 tablespoons of sugar, and 1 teaspoon of kosher salt. We're bringing this not quite to a simmer, just until everything's dissolved, then rapidly chilling and further diluting with a half cup of ice. Completely submerge the onions in the pickling liquid and fridge them at least overnight and up to 1 week. The cold pickling is going to help them retain their shape and crispness. Next up, the sauces, orange and red. I think a mango ginger sauce is going to work nicely with this dish, so in a small saucepan I'm combining 1 cup of chicken stock, 1 small chopped shallot, half a Fresno chili thinly sliced, 1 smashed clove of garlic, 1 teaspoon of ground ginger if you forgot to buy the fresh stuff, a centimeter or 2 of finely grated lemongrass, 1 cup of mango nectar, a little splash of white wine vinegar, and 1 to 2 tablespoons of brown sugar or coconut sugar if you want to be cool about it. Bring to a simmer and cook for about 10 minutes to let the flavors soften and meld. Season to taste with kosher salt, and then we're going to smooth out and thicken this mixture in a blender using xanthan gum, blitzing on high speed until completely smooth, and then with the blender running, adding 1/4 of a teaspoon of xanthan gum at a time until the sauce has enough body to coat the back of a spoon. For me, that ended up being 3/4 of a teaspoon. Give it one last taste for seasoning, pour into a vessel of some kind, and chill until ready to use. Then to make the red sauce, I'm doing the same with 1 cup pomegranate juice, 1 cup chicken stock, 1/4 cup of honey, 1/4 teaspoon white pepper, 1/4 teaspoon ground coriander, and a splash of white wine vinegar. Simmer, blend, thicken, and chill as before. We're dealing with some big flavors, so I'm going to keep the dressing refreshingly simple. The juice of 1 lime, some more of that candied crystallized ginger, about twice as much fruity extra virgin olive oil as there is lime juice, 1 microplaned clove of garlic, kosher salt, freshly ground black pepper, and honey, about 1 tablespoon's worth to create a nice contrast between acid, fat, and sweetness. Tiny whisk or cover and shake into a thick, creamy dressing, which you can prepare the day before. Now for the salad itself, I'm going with a mixture of butter leaf lettuce, red lettuce, dandelion greens, and mustard greens, all annoyingly unchopped and too big to fit in your mouth, as is the trend in new American restaurants nowadays. I'm also adding shaved tri-colored carrot curls, our pickled red onions, and some finely chopped crystallized ginger. Now that we're getting into the a la minute stuff, stuff, it's time to fire our duck, which we're going to place skin side down in a cold, unlubricated stainless steel pan, weighing down if possible to ensure even contact. Then we're going to turn the heat all the way down to low and rotate frequently, gently rendering out the fat for 5 minutes. During this time, the duck should not make a sound. No crackling, popping, or hissing. If it starts making noise, take it off the heat, let it calm down, and continue once it goes quiet. After 5 minutes, your duck should be swimming in a pool of its own fat. That's when we're going to increase the heat slightly if necessary to maintain a gentle bubble. Still no hissing or popping. Now maintaining this cadence for 10 minutes, until the duck skin has become beautifully golden brown, crisp, and ready for the big show. That's when we're going to give it a flip, season with flaky finishing salt, and cook for an additional 5 minutes at this nice low temperature until the thickest part of the duck registers 125 degrees Fahrenheit. Remove to a wire rack set in a rim baking sheet and allow to rest for 5 to 10 minutes. We're obviously going to save all this amazing duck fat, but first we're going to use it to toast our cashews, adding them to the pan and tossing around over medium heat for 2 to 3 minutes until lightly browned and delightfully crisp. Drain on paper towels, and then it's time to dress and assemble our salad. Pour the dressing over top, toss with vigor and enthusiasm, and pile proudly on one side of a large white plate. Top that up with our duck fat fried cashews, and before laying down the duck, I'm going to do the relatively complicated pattern of sauces. 3 tiny dots of the pomegranate sauce juxtaposed against 2 larger dots of the mango sauce. Then I started to carve the duck into bite-sized pieces, but chef got pissed at me for my sloppy sauce work. I tried again, said that was the best I could do, and they told me I could finish out the rest of my shift, whatever that means. Lean the best looking slices of duck into a row in the center, top with a bit more candied ginger, and there you have it, the crunchy munchy duck salad. Medium rare duck with a nice crispy skin, mellowed out bitter greens, and all different kinds of flavorful sauces. My favorite of which was undoubtedly the mango. It's sweet, spicy, fruity, and savory all at once, and the salad makes for a lovely, bright contrast to the rich, fatty duck. But in the end, 2 dollops of that mango sauce wasn't enough. I told that to chef, and they told me to just go home, whatever that means. Now, what this definitely needs is a starch, so it's a good thing that Henry ordered the truffled mashed potatoes, giving me the opportunity to experiment with something I've always wanted to try, using half russets and half Yukon Golds, hopefully getting the best of both worlds with a texture that is at once creamy and fluffy. Pretty standard potato prep. We are peeling and chopping into uniform pieces and dropping it into a pot of cold, lightly salted water. And whenever I make mash like this, my little secret ingredient is lightly crushing 2 cloves of garlic and throwing them right in there with the potatoes. That way they'll get softened and mashed up with all the rest. Bring to a gentle simmer and cook for anywhere from 12 to 18 minutes until the potatoes are super tender but not quite falling apart. I ended up having to severely overcook the russets because, as it turns out, Yukon Golds and russets can take different amounts of time to cook. With the Yukon still firm, I'm draining them, putting them back in the pot, and covering them up for about 10 minutes, which will continue to soften the potatoes without waterlogging them. Then ideally we're going to pass these guys through a fine mesh tamis, but I couldn't find mine, so I'm just going to rice them to ensure a smooth, creamy mash. Then I'm going to return them to the pot over low heat, add about a cup of warm, heavy cream, and a 2-ounce tub of black truffle butter, which contains little bits of actual truffle and no truffle oil, because let's face it, truffle oil is pretty gross. It can have an overwhelming, almost chemical flavor, and this stuff is just going to give it the nice, subtle essence of truffle. Seasoned to taste with kosher salt. Normally we'd use white pepper, but in this case more black specks are just going to look like more truffles. Gently mix over low heat for about 30 seconds and pour into your desired serving vessel, allowing to cool completely before covering and fridging until ready to serve. To serve, I'm going to allow it to come sort of back to room temperature from the fridge. Then I'm going to top it up with some crushed black truffle potato chips, just for a little extra hit of both black truffle and, well, potato. Then one of the many uses for that leftover duck fat is to drizzle generously over top the chips, ensuring better browning and deep flavor. Bake at 375 degrees Fahrenheit for 20 to 30 minutes or until bubbling and lightly browned. Garnish with some freshly picked thyme leaves, and as is so often the case, it's going to get to the table right as we're finishing our entrees. No, that's fine. These were $30. We might as well enjoy them, especially because they are extremely enjoyable. The black truffle is nice and subtle, and the potatoes are delightfully rich in flavor but light in texture. Next up for the gentleman, we have the Kobe filet, which, if it is genuine Kobe, would cost $100 for the 8-ouncer that he ordered, and the restaurant would likely charge $200. So being the photographer for the mayor must pay well. I got my 8 ounces of genuine Kobe filet. I'm going to trim off the excess fat and connective tissue because there's tons of fat in this, as you can see. It's a little bit brown on the outside. That's because it was frozen and it oxidized as it thawed, but it's still going to be delicious, especially after we dry brine it at least 2 hours up to overnight. Now, throughout this dish, I want to utilize a red miso butter, combining 2 tablespoons of red miso paste, about a teaspoon of soy sauce, and 4 ounces of softened butter, creating an absolute umami bomb. I'm going to use this both in the sauce and the mushrooms that accompany the steak. Be sure to thoroughly and freshly season your best carbon steel pan, and then I'm going to build a sauce that's basically a fortified reduced demi-glace, combining 16 ounces of store-bought demi in a medium saucepan, a half dozen cloves of unpeeled garlic cut in half, one small shallot likewise halved, a little splash of Pinot Noir for color and flavor, and we're going to reduce that down to about a quarter of its original volume. Strain out the solids, and now this can be fridged until ready to use. If you're ready to use it now, send it back into the saucepan, bring it up to a bare simmer, kill the heat, and once the bubbles have stopped, we're going to whisk in about 2 tablespoons of our miso butter, emulsifying it together into a thick, devastatingly rich sauce. Hardly necessary for Kobe beef, but hey, this is a first date in a rooftop restaurant. Now is not the time to exercise restraint. Speaking of which, I'm going to execute my very favorite mushroom preparation as of late, propping up a whole head of oyster or maitake mushrooms in an adorable little pan, generously drizzling with extra virgin olive oil, making sure to rub it down into the mushrooms, and then generously brushing with our red miso butter. Season with a little bit of kosher salt and freshly ground black pepper. And this guy's going to roast at 375 degrees Fahrenheit with convection for 25 to 35 minutes or until deeply golden brown, crisp on the outside and meaty on the inside. It also looked like there were a stack of multicolored baby carrots. I'm going to quickly saute these in some vegetable oil, hit them with a splash of water and cover them up to steam, getting them tender throughout before browning in the oven. I'm also going to toss them with a little splash of soy sauce for color and flavor. And before they head into the oven to finish off, I'm hitting them with a few leaves of freshly picked thyme, some freshly ground pepper, and holding off on the salt until they're done. Cover and roast at 375 for 5 to 10 minutes, then uncover and toss occasionally until nicely browned all over. Last but not least, we're placing our Kobe filet into our well-seasoned and lubricated, ripping hot carbon steel pan. The objective here is not to cook the steak, but just to develop a rich, dark brown crust on all sides. Once we've achieved that, this guy too is headed into that 375 degree Fahrenheit oven, where we're going to flip it every 5 minutes until it reaches 125 degrees Fahrenheit at its thickest point. Take it out and let it rest for 5 minutes before carving. I'm going to pour our fortified demi-glace sauce into a totally inappropriate sake cup, stack the carrots in an avant-garde fashion, flank them with our roasted maitake mushroom, and the steak appeared to be simply cut in half. Not my favorite presentation, but I always strive for accuracy when it suits me. Range on the plate, maybe keeping the sauce to the side as it's a little interruptive, wipe up errant juices, and there you have it, a profoundly meaty and savory main, for which the sauce turned out to be surprisingly necessary, because even though this was genuine Kobe beef, I could hardly tell the difference between it and a normal, well-marbled filet mignon. It was certainly juicy, but not enough to justify its price tag. The mushrooms absolutely rock, they're one of my favorite things to make nowadays, and the carrots were carrots with a nice soy glaze, an appropriately subdued side to let the meat do the talking, and like the duck, a well-deserved entrant into the Clean Plate Club. At this point, I'm not going to have any snacks to watch the movie, so last but not least, we have the dessert, which plays an essential plot point in the movie, and it's also the perfect thing to whip up for your drop viewing party. They never said what kind of panna cotta this is, so I'm going to take some creative liberties based off its appearance, blooming 1 packet or 2.5 teaspoons of gelatin in 1 cup of buttermilk, and while that hydrates, combining 2 cups of heavy cream with 2/3 of a cup of sugar in a medium saucepan. I'm also going to add a little pinch of salt and a little splash of vanilla extract. Bring this guy up to a bare simmer once all the sugar's dissolved, lower the heat and whisk in the buttermilk gelatin mixture, cooking gently until the gelatin is completely dissolved. Then while the mixture is still warm, we're going to whisk it together with 4 ounces of goat cheese, creating a mixture for a funky, sweet goat cheese buttermilk panna cotta. Swaddle your bowl with a wet kitchen towel to keep it in place, slowly add the hot mixture to melt the goat cheese, and whisk constantly until the whole thing's nice and smooth. Then strain the mixture into a container that's good for pouring, and use said pouring abilities to fill up some domed silicone molds. As you can see, I'm doing 2 different sizes because I'm not sure what's going to fit my plate, but either way, these guys are headed into the fridge for a couple hours or until set, then wrapped in plastic wrap until ready to use, ideally 2 to 3 days. Then there were little red spheres on top of the panna cotta that almost looked like pomegranate seeds, but they were too perfect. So we're going to employ a little bit of molecular gastronomy and make some spherized pomegranate rosemary caviar, placing about 2 cups of neutral flavored oil in a tall vessel and thoroughly chilling overnight in the fridge. Then once nice and cold, we're combining 1/3 of a cup of pomegranate juice, 1 tablespoon of coconut sugar, 1 sprig of fresh rosemary, and about a half teaspoon of vanilla extract in a small saucepan. I'm bringing that up to a bare simmer, squeezing in the juice of half a lemon, and adding a 1/4 teaspoon of agar-agar powder. This is going to cause the mixture to solidify the instant that it hits the cold oil. Cook and whisk for about 1 minute until the agar-agar is dissolved, strain out the rosemary bits, and funnel into an adjustable squeeze bottle. I'm using this empty olive oil bottle that I've cleaned out. This is ideal because the screw top lets you control the flow of the liquid, which we're going to do directly into our cold oil. And as you can see in this immensely satisfying process, individual drops hit the liquid and immediately spherize. I was being a little bit too overzealous and I ended up with some big deformed clusters, but as long as you take your time, you should end up with perfect pearls of pomegranate. Thoroughly rinse off the oil and dump these guys into some cold water where they can stay for a couple hours before being served. Try to pick out the very nicest ones, strain them in a little sieve, and then it's time to unmold our panna cotta, filling a rim baking sheet halfway with warm warm tap water, dropping in the mold for just a few seconds to loosen things up, inverting and carefully pressing out into your serving vessel of choice. I'm going with the same bowl within a bowl as used in the movie. Then I'm going to use a mini rubber spat dipped in water to tuck in any rough edges underneath the panna cotta. Generously pile on our pomegranate rosemary caviar, trying to keep it all directly on top. And there you have it, a shockingly easy, yet delightfully decadent and elegant dessert. But how does it taste? Well, first off, it's delightfully creamy, almost like a whipped Greek yogurt, and the flavor is phenomenal. The goat cheese and buttermilk work stunningly well with the herb and fruit flavors, and it's going to be my new go-to dinner party dessert, right after the tequila shots, that is. Thanks again to Universal Pictures Home Entertainment for sponsoring this episode. It really is special for me to get to partner with a studio like Universal to create dishes from one of their latest movies. I really enjoyed watching Drop at Home and coming up with what I was going to make. I was a big fan of Megan Fahey in The White Lotus, and it was really cool seeing her in this awesome leading role. If you're a fan of true crime or smart modern thrillers, you'll enjoy Drop as much as I did. Host your own movie night, make some panna cotta, and own or rent Drop at your favorite participating digital retailer today. Scan the QR code or head to the link in the description.